As we mark the 80th anniversary of the signing of the United Nations Charter, we are reminded that our shared vision of international peace and sustainable development founded on respect for international law and international humanitarian law remains unfinished. Around the world, conflicts continue to erase years of progress, while structural conditions such as inequality, exclusion, and weak governments undermine the foundation of stability. These overlapping crises have hit low-income countries the hardest. Extreme poverty has become increasingly concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa and places affected by conflict and fragility, according to World Bank's data. To achieve stronger, inclusive economies and prosperous society, our policy decisions need to be guided by SDG 1, ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. Addressing the root causes of conflict by reducing poverty and inequality is one of the central pillars of Greece's commitment for global peace. Specifically, Greece has recently funded World Foods Programme project for the restoration of Port of Benghazi in Libya, which serves as a critical entry point for food and humanitarian aid to the wider region of North Africa and the Sahel, and WHO rehabilitation project for the Al-Kahir Hospital in Gaza, a critical referral point for displaced population. Mr. President, Greece firmly believes that poverty and underdevelopment are not just development concerns, they are fundamental threats to peace and security. As outlined in the Secretary-General's new Agenda for Peace, conflict prevention must be rooted in inclusive development, social cohesion, and institutional resilience. In this context, allow me to highlight 4 key areas of focus. First, we need to strengthen and mainstream existing approaches to address the root causes of conflict, such as poverty, food insecurity, absence of rule of law, and violent extremism. Closely interlinked, our humanitarian, development, and peace efforts is key to bring more efficient on the ground in conformity with the triple humanitarian development peace nexus. In this respect, the Peace-Building Commission is ideally placed to raise awareness of regional efforts, local community expertise, as well as the cross-border dimensions of conflict. We welcome its advice, which is not only valuable to us in the context of this meeting, but can also guide us in our future endeavors. For this reason, Greece, during this year's Peace-Building Architecture Review, reiterated strong support for expanding PBC's roles in regional settings and cross-cutting areas, including human rights and climate-related peace and security risks. In this respect, cooperation with the AU Commission remains crucial. Second, peace must be inclusive to be durable, in line with SDG 16 and conflict and corruption. Greece champions participatory and representative governance at all levels. The full and meaningful participation of women, youth, and marginalized communities is indispensable for creating resilient institutions and achieving long-term development goals. Third, we call for greater investment in conflict prevention and peace building. We strongly encourage all member states to agree on raising assessed contribution to meet conflict-affected countries, rising the requirements for support for the Peace Building Fund. Additionally, formalizing PBC relations with international financial institutions and regional development banks and strengthening its cooperation with ECOSOC can better operationalize its development impact on the ground. Fourth, Greece remains committed to the collective aspiration to enhance the conservation and sustainable use of oceans and their resources by implementing international law as reflected in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, in line with Target 14C of the SDGs. Mr. President, in closing, let me stress that Greece supports a rule-based global order with multilateralism at its key principle and the United Nations at its core. We remain committed to multilateralism and to a UN system that is more responsive, inclusive, and aligned with the real needs of those most at risk. Let us seize this milestone year, UN 80, as a moment to recommit to a vision of peace anchored in dignity, equity, and opportunity for all. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, Mr. Minister, we welcome you as President of the Security Council. The Guyanan presidency proposed a discussion today of a complicated and a highly inconvenient matter for many at the UN Security Council, that is the link between poverty and conflicts. We thank the UN Secretary General for his briefing, as well as the Assistant Secretary General Madam Muraja and Mr. Yusuf for their briefings. Mr. President, as is the case in many other similar situations when the Council raises matters peripheral to its mandate to the maintenance of international peace and security, and when there's a clear lack of consensus, and this has been confirmed by the situation with the initiative to reach agreement on a Council product, we nevertheless stand ready to contribute to the discussion. However, the greatest challenge is to find consensus regarding the root causes of the challenges under discussion. The issue of countering poverty without being fused with human rights, gender, democracy, and climate change-related challenges, this is an issue which remains a priority task for the socioeconomic pillar of the United Nations, the top priority under the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. According to paragraph 35 of this agenda, peace and security will be at risk where poverty is not surmounted and sustainable development has not taken root. At the same time, acute poverty as a factor which creates fertile ground for the outbreak of new hotbeds of tension, this is neither the sole nor even the main reason here. It is evident to all that there are countries on the map with low development levels who are not mired in the quagmire of conflict. On the contrary, there is a need to recognize the fact that the real root causes for conflict remain external intervention in domestic affairs of states and the geopolitical ambitions of certain groups of countries who are striving to expand their zones of influence at the expense of others and are contriving to buttress their dwindling domination. The starkest manifestation of this is evident in the legacy of colonialism and neo-colonialist practices, as well as with the aggressive practice being carried out by foreign colonial powers reigning in their former protégés by siphoning off their resources and imposing unilateral coercive measures. This is worth dwelling on in greater detail. The 16 June general debate and adoption of a resolution proclaiming the International Day Against UCMs showed that illegitimate unilateral sanctions are categorically qualified by developing countries and the expert community as a cudgel to contrive to entrench sovereign states in a state of poverty, to generate internal social tensions, as well as regional destabilization. The lifting of these sanctions and the removal of such countries as, for example, Cuba from discriminatory political lists would be the best example of combating poverty and conflict prevention. Issues related to external debt are also being exacerbated. Since 2011, the number of states with high debt levels rose from 22 to 59. African countries' external debt has greater than 24.5% of their aggregate GDP, and at the same time in many states in the region, this figure is significantly greater, up to 60%, and expenditures for servicing these debts are outstripping expenditures for education and medicine. The highest percentage rates for debt obligation servicing apply precisely for the poorest countries of Africa, Latin America, Asia, and the Pacific Ocean. Thus, in accordance with the so-called rules-based order, which is championed by the West, this so-called rules-based order, which was mentioned today, the Global South falls into the trap of cyclical debt accumulation and is transformed into a bargaining chip for Western states' geopolitical agendas. There's an alarming situation experienced by those countries also who are not being targeted by sanctions or are mired in a debt trap. For example, since 2024, we have seen a sustained trend of the reduction of external assistance by major donors. According to OECD assessments, overall official development assistance levels in 2024 fell by 7.1%. According to forecasts this year, 2025, this figure may fall by yet another 9 to 17%. Appeals from the UN Development and Humanitarian Assistance Agencies are only 10 to 20% met, and donors presently have priorities other than helping countries in need. They are reorienting their budgets to militarize their economies and to finance the weapons-related demands of other states. Thereby, they are merely fanning the flames of current conflicts instead of honoring their obligations and preventing those conflicts, including by combating poverty in the least developed countries. Blatant examples of external players dragging developing countries into a quagmire of poverty and instability is seen in specific country and regional situations. For example, the situation in Afghanistan. Afghanistan had for years been dependent on international assistance due to the NATO troops' presence over the span of 2 decades, and subsequently was utter financially depleted, targeted by unilateral sanctions, and on the brink of humanitarian economic collapse. Sahara countries, in addition to illegitimate unilateral restrictions, are encountering catastrophic underfinancing of the humanitarian appeal. 9%, that is the amount from the overall humanitarian needs, which the people of the region, buffeted by terrorism, as a result of NATO's armed incursion in Libya, and has been receiving. The Council's agenda is replete with such examples. To conclude, we once again wish to draw the Council members' attention to the fact that it would be more advisable to consider questions being raised today at universal and specialized United Nations formats and mechanisms. These include the General Assembly, as well as the leading bodies of the United Nations Development System, including the executive funds and programs, in order not to jeopardize the principle of the division of labor between the principal organs of the United Nations. The Security Council could turn to them, however, merely in the context of the maintenance of international peace and security and for specific country situations. The body that holds a unique position at the intersection of peace and development issues, the PBC, also is positioned to contribute to enhancement of coordination of efforts where the voices of host state governments are given pride of place. At the same time, we believe that in order to implement Agenda 2030, there's a need to revert back to dialogue among states based on sovereign equality of all of the members of the international community and their right to choose their economic models, as well as in accordance with the principle of indivisibility of security. The fight against poverty needs to remain the leading, unchanged priority for our collective action. Success will be determined by whether we are capable to usher in a transition away from past colonialist practices towards a future of mutually respectful relations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Panama would like to thank Guyana for convening this open debate, which addresses a complex and profound issue, but one which is of great international relevance. We also welcome His Excellency Hugh Hilton Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Also, we would like to acknowledge the valuable contribution of Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Madam Kani Wignaraja, Assistant Secretary General and Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific, and the representative. For Panama, conflict and its most direct manifestations of violence undoubtedly worsen poverty and the challenges to sustainable development. But we also recognize that structural conditions such as inequality, colonial legacy, external interference can provide fertile ground for instability without being direct causes of conflict. In this regard, it's essential that we highlight that more than poverty in itself, it's the institutional weakness which very often makes social tensions become organized violence. States where institutions are challenges, where justice, security, and basic services are inaccessible or unequal, are particularly vulnerable to cycles of violence and conflict. Unfortunately, This reality can be seen clearly in the case of our brotherly nation of Haiti. Today, it's facing a multidimensional crisis that goes beyond the humanitarian issues. More than 85% of its capital is under the control of armed gangs. Murders, sexual violence, and systematic violations of human rights have increased, and 1.3 million people are internally displaced. To this data, we have to add the weak government that's made it possible for fear and exclusion to have become instrumentalized by violent actors in order to forcefully recruit children and young people. It's not just an issue of poverty, it's a collapse of the social contract. We are seeing similar situations in the Sahel, in Central Africa and very many other regions where things like climate change, food insecurity, restrictions on the rights of women, ethnic discrimination, amongst other things, are leading to conditions of instability, and those effects directly affect the civilian population. The pattern is repeated. According to the Multidimensional Poverty Index of the United Nations Development Programme in 2024, more than 1.1 billion people are living in acute poverty, and almost half of them, in almost half of those cases, these are conflict situations. Additionally, there are very many internally displaced due to violence, and the majority of those were women and girls, according to UNHCR figures. And the same report says that 455 million people living in poverty are specifically in conflict contexts. President, Panama firmly believes that international action must be focused not only in mitigating the effects of conflicts, but also in strengthening the institutional capacities of states to prevent these situations, strengthening the rule of law, fair access to public services, and the promotion of legitimate institutions that are transparent and effective are strategic investments for lasting peace. It's just as violence, poverty, and social fragmentation tend to feed into each other, the Sustainable Development Goals show that improvements in education, health, employment, and governance can generate a positive impact, strengthening social cohesion and preventing a resurgence of tensions. President, in this global challenging environment, Panama stresses the need for this Council to broaden its view and not just look at immediate security situations. We need to recognize that current situations are complex, interdependent, and multidimensional. Responding to those with a comprehensive vision that includes strengthening institutions will mean that we will be better prepared to build genuine and sustainable peace. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, President, and thank you to the Guyanese presidency for organizing this open debate. I also wish to join others in thanking Secretary General Guterres, UNDP Assistant Secretary General Wagneraya, and the EU Commission Chairperson Youssef for their valuable briefings. Mr. President, the UN Charter entrusts Security Council with a broad mandate to maintain international peace and security. This responsibility extends beyond conflict resolution. It also places upon this body a crucial role in early warning and conflict prevention. While other UN bodies, such as ECOSOC or the Peacebuilding Commission, might be better positioned to develop concrete solutions for complex and mutually reinforcing relationship between poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict, debates such as today's can enhance the Security Council's ability to better fulfill its primary responsibility. As we walk to this chamber, the UNDP's headquarters across the street reminds us daily, quote, "There is no peace without development, and there is no development without peace," unquote. Although conflict is by no means exclusive to developing countries, numerous studies confirm that the risk for conflict is significantly higher in contexts marked by poverty, inequalities, weak governance, the erosion of trust in public institutions, deep economic challenges, and climate stress, among other contributing factors. Road to violence often begins long before the first bullets are fired. Mr. President, today I'd like to offer 3 considerations for the Council. First, investments in development and resilience are investments in peace and security, and evidence proves they are cost-effective. Achieving the 2030 Agenda remains the main instrument to address root causes of poverty, conflict, and instability. Sustainable development, strong institutions, good governance based on the rule of law, respect and protection of human rights, as well as access to basic services such as water and sanitation, education and healthcare not only save lives, they also reduce the immense financial cost associated with post-conflict reconstruction. Prevention is the most efficient and cost-effective tool to guide fragile countries from conflict towards peace and resilience, enabling them to absorb, mitigate, and withstand shocks. This is a trade-off that decision makers cannot afford to ignore. Second, we believe in human-centered approach to security. Our responses must include climate adaptation, food security, sustainable development, and inclusive access to essential services, education, jobs, and economic opportunities. Investing in children's well-being and empowering women and youth are necessary and effective peace-building strategies. Education remains one of the most powerful tools to counter radicalization and prevent recruitment into armed groups. Ensuring access to education, especially for girls, is one of Slovenia's key priorities during our term on the Executive Board of UNICEF, and in 2024, Slovenia joined the School Meals Coalition, which aims to ensure that every child worldwide has a school meal by 2030. Also important is the aspect of human dignity. The full, equal, meaningful, and safe participation of all women, including those facing social and economic exclusion, has been shown to improve the effectiveness of conflict prevention, mediation efforts, and humanitarian response. Slovenia has placed the empowerment of women in the center of its development aid policies as the critical element to strengthen societal resilience and advancing sustainable development. Finally, without sustained efforts to build resilience, today's challenges will re-emerge tomorrow. Advancing the coherent implementation of the triple nexus remains critical to the effectiveness and sustainability of our collective response. The triple nexus approach must be operationalized in practice through integrated investments in basic social services, local governance, and social cohesion, alongside peacekeeping and peace-building efforts. As the member of the Security Council, ECOSOC, and the Peace-Building Commission, Slovenia remains committed to building bridges between these 3 bodies so that they could better address complex and multi-phase challenges that we're facing today. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for the statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Maria Malmer Stenograd, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden.
Thank you, President. I'm honored to make this statement on behalf of the Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and my own country, Sweden. Last week, the Uppsala Conflict Data Program established that the number of armed conflicts in the world has reached a historic high. There are now 61 active conflicts. We firmly maintain that respect for international law is essential for peace, security, and development. In this chamber, we are often reminded of the direct casualties of war. However, the secondary effects of conflict and how they negatively impact development are less talked about. Armed conflict undermines health systems, leading to increased mortality. War disrupts education systems, with effects on future incomes. Conflict destroys infrastructure, impedes access to clean water and food, and damages the environment. Conflict results in forced displacement. We also have the invisible war wounds, the traumas and long-term effects on mental health, which can persist for generations. Poverty and underdevelopment can also drive instability. A combination of weak governance and marginalized communities often increases the risk of violence. President, to break today's vicious spiral of escalating armed conflict on the one hand and growing poverty and underdevelopment on the other, I want to focus on one aspect: the importance of empowering women and girls. Promoting gender equality is key to achieving peace, security, and development. This is not just a statement taken out of thin air. Studies show that women are more likely than men to invest their earnings in their families and communities. Investing in women is one of the smartest things to do to break the poverty trap. That includes ensuring their sexual and reproductive health and rights. GDP per capita would be almost 20% higher on average across countries if gender employment gaps were closed. We also know that women's political participation leads to more long-term peace and stability. Research shows that peace agreements with women signatories have higher rates of implementation and last longer. Yet women make up only 5% of the negotiators, 9% of the mediators, and 19% of the signatories. Given this and other evidence at hand, we conclude that it is unrealistic, even impossible, to expect peace, security, and development to happen unless we take gender equality more seriously. Therefore, we call on the Security Council to place women, peace, and security high on the agenda and encourage all member states to step up their efforts for gender equality. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, Ms. Stenograd, for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Mario Lutbekin, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Uruguay.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Uruguay would like to thank the presidency of our friends from Guyana for the timely convening of this open debate. Uruguay reaffirms its commitment to multilateralism as an indispensable tool to comprehensively address the challenges of peace, security, and development. As we approach the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter, it's imperative to renew our collective commitment to promoting stable, resilient, and equitable environments. To do this, we must address the structural causes of conflict, such as poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation. We are convinced that the Security Council can play a key role in this discussion. There can't be lasting peace without sustainable development, and no development without peace. Managing risks and building resistance demands comprehensive approaches that connect security with development and human rights, alongside a robust, fairer, and more equitable international financial architecture. We are convinced that investing in sustainable development is the path to eradicating poverty, generating economic opportunities, strengthening governance and the social contract, and reducing the drivers of violence. Links between poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict require coherent and coordinated action. In this context, I would like to highlight the following points. Firstly, data shows that in context of multidimensional poverty, where there are combined deficiencies in access to basic services, education, decent employment, and the full exercise of rights, the social fabric weakens and the conditions that fuel cycles of violence are amplified. Therefore, it is essential that the Security Council's early warning mechanisms integrate structural variables such as territorial inequality, gender gaps, or youth unemployment and institutional weakness in order to effectively anticipate tensions. Secondly, peace must translate into opportunities for those living with multiple deprivations, especially children, youth, and women in post-conflict settings. Decent work, education, and economic inclusion must be at the heart of prevention strategies, as well as be part of the comprehensive frameworks for peace missions and international cooperation. In this sense, we reiterate the importance of reforming the international financial architecture to ensure mechanisms for debt restructuring and relief, investment attraction, and developing financing. Thirdly, we believe that peace building and sustainable development must be anchored in context-sensitive diagnostics centered on communities, local ownership, understanding of social territorial dynamics, and the participation of youth and women are necessary conditions for the success of multilateral efforts aimed at conflict prevention and the building of resilience, in addition to strengthening the legitimacy of the processes and contributing to restoring the social fabric. And four, while the interdependence between security, development, and human rights is widely recognized, a gap persists between discourse and action, with a concerning trend towards prioritizing military responses over comprehensive and preventive approaches. The Security Council needs mandates to integrate sustainable development, territorial equity, and distributive justice. These are key dimensions for achieving lasting peace, including in the design and implementation of peacekeeping operations. I would like to mention that as a member of the PBC, we believe that this body can and should play an active role as a bridge between prevention, development, and peace building, offering strategic advice based on the experiences of affected states. We should also strengthen the role of ECOSOC in monitoring development financing alongside the Security Council strategies in conflict or transition contexts, ensuring a coherent response that integrates always with the 2030 agenda. We need to focus on the early stages of a conflict cycle for prevention, address structural causes of conflicts, many of which are socio-economic in nature, and rely on strong investments in quality public services and economic opportunities. These are fundamental elements to providing responses that reinforce cohesion and restore the social contract. Uruguay is committed to working actively to ensure that the United Nations system evolves towards a more coherent, inclusive, and preventive approach. Only through effective multilateralism centered on human rights can we move toward truly sustainable peace. And I think that that's what we should be concentrating on in our work. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Lubekin, for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Tauhid Hussein, Advisor for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Interim Government of Bangladesh.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, I thank the Presidency of Guyana for organizing this timely and important debate. We live in a world where poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict all are interconnected. If we are to preserve international peace and security, addressing these challenges is not an option, it is an essential. In Bangladesh, we have always viewed young people as agents of positive change, from the historic language movement of 1952 to our liberation struggle, and most recently the student-led Monsoon Revolution. Our youth have consistently led the way in fighting against inequalities and injustice. We are also deeply aware of the consequences when young people are denied access to education and employment. Across regions and contexts, large segments of youth, when left behind, can become vulnerable to manipulation and violent ideologies that exploit identity and faith. Excellencies, this Council is well aware that protracted crises often emerge from systemic marginalization. For over 8 years, Bangladesh has been hosting 1.2 million Rohingya refugees who fled from their own country, Myanmar, due to persecution by the military regime. Our humanitarian act has put us in immense socio-economic and environmental challenges, and the situation is now posing new security risks. We call for renewed international attention and action to ensure their return with safety and rights. This is not only a matter of justice, but also vital for preventing a root cause of a potential instability in our region. Mr. President, the current development and security landscape are shaped by long-standing inequities, many of which are rooted in centuries of political subjugation and economic exploitation. Correcting these imbalances is our shared responsibility. In this context, we must aim for a future shaped by the bold aspiration of 3 zeros pronounced by Professor Yunus: zero poverty, zero unemployment, and net zero carbon emissions. These are not just development goals, they are foundational to lasting peace and stability. Realizing this vision will require an alignment of peace-building efforts with inclusive and forward-looking development strategies. Here, we see strong merit in closer coordination across the 3 pillars of the UN. It is imperative that this Council works closely with ECOSOC and Peace-Building Commission to ensure that peace-building strategies are in conformity with development realities. Instead of only investing in recovery, we must also build resilience. Let us enable people, especially the most vulnerable, and give them the opportunity to thrive. In doing so, we see the transformative potential of social business pioneered by Nobel laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus. By prioritizing people over profits, such enterprises boost inclusive growth and reduce grievances that would otherwise lead to unrest. We believe this approach offers valuable lessons worth replicating globally. Bangladesh remains committed to doing its part and to working alongside all concerned in pursuit of a more just, peaceful, and secure world. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Hussein for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Benedito dos Santos Freitas, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, we thank Guyana as the President of the UN Security Council for organizing this important high-level open debate. We wish to also thank you, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, for his comprehensive remarks, and we extend our gratitude to the Assistant Secretary General of the UNDP and the Chairperson of the African Union for their comprehensive briefings. Mr. President, esteemed members of the Security Council, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is a great honor for Timor-Leste to contribute to this debate on the poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict, implications for international peace and security. Mr. President, Excellencies, poverty and underdevelopment are not merely social conditions. They are potent catalysts for instability. In fragile states, they exacerbate tensions both within and between communities. A lack of access to basic services, high unemployment rates, and pervasive marginalization create profound grievances that can readily escalate into violent confrontations, thereby undermining peace agreements and perpetuating cycles of instability. Furthermore, weak institutions often struggle to deliver governance, security, and justice impartially, transforming poverty and underdevelopment into both symptoms and primary drivers of conflict. As member of the G7+, a group of fragile and conflict-affected states, we possess first-hand experience of how deeply socioeconomic vulnerabilities shape peace-building efforts. Our insights we share today are drawn directly from our own journey from fragility to progress. After the restoration of independence in 2002, Timor-Leste faced devastated infrastructure, fragile institutions, and deep socioeconomic exclusion. This dire situation prompted us to fundamentally rethink our trajectory of nationhood in close collaboration with our international partners. Through sustained international partnership, inclusive politics, and targeted poverty reduction initiatives, we have achieved measurable progress. Through significant challenges undeniably remain. Through community-driven development programs and strategic rural infrastructure investments, the national poverty headcount ratio notably fell from 50.4% in 2007 to 41.8% in 2014. However, the triple shocks of the natural disasters, the COVID-19 pandemic, and political deadlock from 2017 to 2023 severely hamper our poverty alleviation efforts. The current government is diligently working to reverse these setbacks. To diversify our economy, the government established the Petroleum Fund in 2002. This fund has enabled significant investments across various sectors, including agriculture, small and medium enterprises, and nascent tourism. The Petroleum Fund's establishment also led to the dramatic expansion of electricity coverage from single-digit percentages at independence to 97% nationwide, and an impressive increase in life expectancy from 57 to 70 years over 2 decades. Critically, all our development and peace-building programs are fully integrated into the government's annual planning cycle and meticulously aligned under the Strategic Development Plan 2011 to 2030. This plan sets clear indicators and objectives with the overarching aim of achieving middle-income status by 2030. Despite these achievements, persistent challenges include low economic growth, rising unemployment, continued poverty, and underdeveloped infrastructure. To address this, the government empowers rural communities to manage small-scale infrastructure projects, ensuring their relevance, ownership, and long-term sustainability. Unconditional cash transfers for vulnerable households continue to reduce acute food insecurity and foster vital social cohesion. The government remains committed to strengthening public financial management and anti-corruption frameworks, thereby increasing transparency and accountability in the resource allocation. We have also launched public-private partnerships in agro-processing and fisheries, effectively connecting smallholder farmers to both domestic and export markets. Given the decline in foreign assistance, we urge the international community to consider the following recommendations. Revisit the current financial architecture, provide multi-year programmatic funding modalities specifically tailored to fragile contexts. This will empower governments to plan and implement long-term development strategies under national leadership. The transition from over-reliance on official development assistance to fostering genuine economic resilience must be actively pursued. Integrate rigorous conflict analysis. Ensure that all development and humanitarian operations include thorough conflict analysis to mitigate unintended tensions and amplify peace dividends. Support digital infrastructure. Promote mobile banking and e-governance solutions that can leapfrog traditional development barriers and generate much-needed youth employment. Leverage expertise and investment. Seek expertise and investment from emerging economies and responsible businesses to diversify economics, facilitate knowledge transfer, and create sustainable value chains. Excellencies, peace extends far beyond the mere absence of violence. It demands conditions that uphold human dignity, provide genuine opportunity, and instill hope. Poverty and underdevelopment fundamentally undermine these essential conditions and are potent fuels for instability. Therefore, the global commitment to peace and security is intrinsically inseparable from our collective efforts to eradicate poverty and promote inclusive development, especially in fragile states on the front lines of conflict. Timor-Leste reaffirms its unwavering dedication to this unified agenda and urges all partners to intensify collaboration and share responsibility in building a more just, peaceful, and prosperous world. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Dos Santos Freitas for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Serap Guler, Minister of State at the Federal Foreign Office of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am honored to take the floor on behalf of the new German government and would like to thank Guyana for today's important debate about the link between poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict. This year, we celebrate the United Nations' 80th anniversary. We must remember the three pillars of the United Nations: peace, development, and human rights are not standalone priorities. We must always keep in mind all the three pillars. And we must work to ensure a coherent approach across the United Nations systems with the aim of a safer, more prosperous world. Mr. President, Germany has long focused on stabilization and peace building across the world. Our experience confirms what many have said during today's debate. The root causes of conflict must be addressed. We need to focus on strong institutions, inclusive governance, and dialogue. And most importantly, we must promote economic development. The Peacebuilding Commission and the Peacebuilding Fund are supporting countries in their nationally led efforts to build sustainable, lasting peace. Another great example of an inclusive approach is the Regional Stabilization Facility in the Lake Chad region, which Germany has supported for many years. Mr. President, as you have pointed out, addressing climate change must be a priority. Climate change undermines sustainable development. It makes communities vulnerable. It can lead to conflict. Germany has therefore set up a dedicated portfolio with climate-sensitive peace projects. The Security Council has recognized these links in several mission mandates. This was also underscored at the Peacekeeping Ministerial in Berlin on the 30th and 40th May of this year. We call on the members of the Security Council to continue this work, meeting the realities faced by many nations and people on the ground. At the same time, the entire United Nations systems must coordinate better to find solutions to the climate and development challenges. The UN Climate Security Mechanism is a perfect example of how to break down silos. Expertise must be combined across pillars. As longtime supporter and largest donor of this mechanism, Germany is proud to sponsor a network of climate and security advisors. And we are proud to co-lead the group of friends on climate and security here in New York, together with our partner, Nauru. Mr. President, in closing, let me underline that Germany's commitment to global peace and sustainable development remains as strong as ever. In times of uncertainty, Germany remains a reliable partner for the United Nations system and its member states. Our actions are guided by the belief that no one be left behind. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Guler for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Nguyen Minh Vu, First Vice Foreign Minister of Vietnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, ministers, and colleagues, I thank Guyana for organizing this important open debate. I also thank you and extend my delegation's appreciation to the Secretary General and others honorable briefers for the insight. I'd like to make 3 points. Firstly, I think that there's a common understanding around the table that there can be no lasting peace without sustainable development, and there's no sustainable development without lasting peace. And the Security Council is expected to not just realize, but to work more on this reality. Under the Security Council, primary responsibility is not to address poverty and underdevelopment. It played a pivotal role in shaping conditions for development through the maintenance of international peace and security. And in order to create good conditions for peace and security and development, we must give greater attention to the structural drivers of conflict: poverty, inequality, food insecurity, climate change, and the erosion of livelihood. These are not just development challenges, but also security challenges. And if not addressed properly, there can be triggers and even multipliers of conflict. And therefore, there's a need for a shift in mindset. Political solutions are not enough. A military solution should be minimized. A more sustainable solution must be a people-centered approach that places development at the heart of any peace effort, particularly in the security and the conflict-fragile regions and countries. And secondly, I speak from Vietnam's own experiences, emerging from decades of war, and with development at the center of our post-war efforts, and with the support and assistance of both bilateral and multilateral development donors, including UN agencies. We have moved on, and with pride, been among 25 countries, having halved the multidimensional poverty index since 2010. I would say that Vietnam is a typical example of how important the UN role in global development, particularly in post-conflict settings. Through advancing development resilience and social cohesion, we have laid a strong foundation for sustained peace and inclusive growth in Vietnam for the past 50 years. From this very experience, during our non-permanent membership at the Council in 2010 and 2021, Vietnam places a strong priorities on the promotion of development in the peace and security agenda. We initiated Resolution 2573 on the protection of critical infrastructure essential to the survival of civilian populations in armed conflict. It is indeed an affirmation that even amid war, amid conflict, seeds of sustainable peace and development must be planted and must be protected. We hope that such momentum will continue going forward. And finally, from this perspective, we offer 3 proposals. First, the Security Council should systematically address development-related root causes of conflict in its deliberation and work. This point has been mentioned by many before, and I think that it should be done through the Security Council closer coordination with ECOSOC, with Peacekeeping Commission, and relevant UN agency. And second, poverty eradication, social inclusion, and investment in human capital and critical infrastructure should be prioritized across the entire conflict spectrum, from early warning and prevention to post-conflict reconstruction. And third, a more coherent whole-system approach is needed to align peacekeeping, peace-building, and development efforts. Development priorities must be integrated into peacekeeping funding strategy with closer coordination between the Security Council, UN agency, financial institutions, and donors to support sustainable recovery in conflict-affected countries. As the United Nations approaches its 80th anniversary, it is a moment for reflection and recommitment. We must do more to uphold the original vision of the Charter, which sees peace, development, and human dignity as inseparable. Vietnam called for a new cycle of well-funded and integrated global projects aimed at addressing poverty and underdevelopment in conflict-fragile countries and regions. I support Madam Kani, representative from UNDP, having just mentioned that we need more intentional global projects like that. So Vietnam remains committed to working with all partners to promote a more effective, inclusive, and sustainable peace and security agenda and sustainable development. Thank you so much.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Wolf for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Carlos Fernandez de Casio, Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Cuba.
Mr. President, we thank Guyana for promoting this meeting under the leadership of your President. First and foremost, Cuba strongly condemns the Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people and the recent and unjustified attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Both crimes are supported and granted impunity by the government of the United States. Both flagrantly violate the Charter of the United Nations, international law, and they represent a new and dangerous escalation of the conflict in the Middle East. At the Millennium Summit in 2000, the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro Ruz, stated, and I quote, "Anyone can understand that the fundamental goal of the United Nations in the challenging century that is beginning is to save the world not only from war, but also from underdevelopment, hunger, disease, poverty, and the destruction of the natural means that are essential for human existence. And it must do so urgently before it is too late." End of quotation. A quarter of a century later, and as we approach the 80th anniversary of the organization, we are a long way away from saving the planet. A recent report by the Secretary General indicates that 47% of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are already conservative and limited, are not progressing at a sufficient pace, and 18% of them are regressing. So there is the risk that more than 2/3 of the 2030 agenda goals will not be met, with only 5 years remaining before the agreed deadline that was set in 2015. Now, more than ever, international peace and security are threatened by escalating conflicts, acts of aggression, unconventional wars, economic blockades, regime change attempts, and frequent violations of the UN Charter and international law. Enormous resources are squandered on the arms race, with global military spending rising alarmingly for the 10th consecutive year. In 2024, it reached $2.718 trillion. That's a 9.4% increase over 2023, driven by the war-focused policies and trajectory of the United States. Meanwhile, global poverty has not decreased, and hunger levels have drastically increased throughout the world. Conservative data indicates that in 2024, 670 million people were living in conditions of extreme poverty. More than 295 million people in 53 countries and territories experienced acute hunger, and the number of people facing catastrophic levels of hunger reached a historic high. It is urgent that we implement the Declaration on the Right to Development. The vast resources currently allocated to military spending must be directed towards reducing hunger and poverty in order to help bridge the 4 trillion annual investment gap that is needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in developing countries. Underdevelopment and poverty resulting from the unequal distribution of wealth remain among the fundamental causes of the majority of conflicts. Lasting peace requires addressing and eradicating the root causes of conflicts, particularly the economic and social development problems stemming from centuries of colonization, slavery, plunder, and wars for the dividing up of the world. It is urgent to change the irrational and unsustainable model of production and consumption inherent in current capitalism. Developed countries must fulfill their historic responsibility to the Global South and honor their commitments with regard to official development assistance. In this world where the philosophy of plunder prevails, it seems almost impossible to achieve the eradication of poverty and progress toward development. We cannot delay in building a new, just, democratic and equitable international order, as well as urgently reform the international financial architecture. The General Assembly must lead these efforts, and states must strengthen international solidarity and cooperation in order to eradicate poverty and move toward development. In the face of the dangers threatening humanity today, we will never abandon the aspiration of leaving future generations a world of peace, where the sovereignty of states is respected, where there is no interference in their internal affairs, and where the full exercise of people's right to self-determination is guaranteed, so essential for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Fernandez de Casio for his statement. I now wish to remind all speakers to limit their statements to no more than 4 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out its work expeditiously. The flashing light on the microphone will prompt speakers to bring their remarks to a close after 4 minutes. I now give the floor to the representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Guyana for convening this meeting and the briefers for their valuable insights. As we mark the 80th anniversary of the UN this year, we need to reflect upon ourselves. Have we succeeded in saving our generation from the scourge of war and providing them with the better standards of life? The stark reality today may prove otherwise. From violence against the Palestinians in Gaza, the rising tension in the Middle East, to decades of conflict and instability in parts of Africa. Indeed, ongoing conflicts across the world deepen poverty and inequality, becoming breeding grounds for grievance, instability, and violence. With nearly half of the 1.1 billion people living in acute poverty are in countries experiencing war or fragility. Thus, peace and prosperity must be pursued in tandem. In this precarious time, the Security Council should prove that it can serve as a catalyst for peace, which in turn can bring prosperity to all humankind. On this note, I would like to share several points. First, investing in sustaining peace. In this regard, enhancing synergy between the Security Council and the work of the wider UN system is crucial. Greater alignment between the Security Council and the PBC, as well as the PBF, must be pursued to mobilize political and financial support. Closer cooperation with development actors must also be forged, ensuring that resources are available to deliver mandates on peace building and sustaining peace effectively. Second, supporting nationally owned peace-building strategies. Inclusive participation and tailored responses are key in this effort to strengthen institutional capacities in addressing root causes, improving living conditions, and avoiding relapse. Our peacekeepers have witnessed firsthand the impact of these approaches on peace efforts by supporting community empowerment, including through civil-military coordination, to build resilience of the populations, such as trainings to enhance skills and create economic opportunities, providing medical assistance and supporting infrastructure maintenance. Third, promoting the role of regional organization in conflict prevention and resolution. Tapping the experience of regional organizations by regularly inviting them to the Council's meeting will be instrumental, in particular when crafting responses to complex and protracted conflicts and addressing their root causes. ASEAN, for instance, is a testament to collective effort in shifting potential conflict into development cooperation and promoting preventive diplomacy approaches in the region. Mr. President, Indonesia reaffirms its conviction that there can be no peace without development, and sustainable development remains out of reach without peace. Strengthening the whole of multilateral system is key to comprehensively address the root causes of conflicts, including poverty and underdevelopment. Rest assured of Indonesia's commitment towards this end. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Indonesia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Kazakhstan.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, at the outset I would like to commend the delegation of Guyana for convening this timely and important debate. We convey our appreciation to Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Assistant Secretary General of UNDP, Kani Ignoraya, and Chairperson of the African Union Commission for their thorough briefings. Kazakhstan firmly believes that there is no sustainable peace without sustainable development, and equally no sustainable development without peace. This nexus is not merely theoretical. It is reality for millions around the world. Many conflicts are directly linked to insufficient development, rooted in extreme poverty, unequal distribution of resources, lack of employment opportunities, and inadequate infrastructure. The setbacks facing the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, alongside the increase in conflicts and the overwhelming demand for humanitarian aid, underscore the urgency for our collective action. The situation in Afghanistan, where years of conflict have deeply intertwined with underdevelopment and humanitarian challenges, serves as a stark reminder of these profound linkages in our region. The Security Council, while fulfilling its mandate, needs to bolster comprehensive and cohesive UN effort to prevent violent conflict. This includes supporting economic, social, and political transformations, protecting development gains during active conflicts, and promoting long-term transactions to prevent a return to violence. As the concept note highlights, every dollar invested in prevention can save a significant amount in conflict-related costs, but most importantly, it saves human lives. This clearly demonstrates that tackling poverty and underdevelopment is indeed a powerful tool for conflict prevention. Kazakhstan therefore calls for enhanced cooperation between the Security Council and other relevant UN organs, such as the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, and the Peacebuilding Commission. This synergy is crucial to effectively address the deep-rooted factors that drive and sustain protracted violent conflicts. As a practical step, we suggest that ECOSOC members should be included in the Security Council's field missions to subsequently work on socio-economic issues in the respective countries. We must also strengthen our early warning and conflict analysis capabilities to better understand the diverse root causes of conflict and ensure that our decisions and mandates are informed by these crucial insights. Recognizing that the causes of conflict vary across regions. It is vital to support tailored, region-specific approaches. In this context, the establishment of the UN Regional Center for Sustainable Development Goals for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty City stands as a testament to the commitment of Central Asian nations to advancing peace and stability through sustainable development and joint action. In conclusion, as we approach the 80th anniversary of the United Nations and in light of the Pact for the Future and Secretary General's UN 80 initiative, let us recommit to a comprehensive, holistic approach that prioritizes prevention and sustainable development as the bedrock of international peace and security. Kazakhstan stands ready to contribute to those vital efforts. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Kazakhstan for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Austria.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, colleagues. The saying that there can be no peace without development and no development without peace may sound like a closed loop, perhaps even a vicious cycle, but history teaches us that cycles can be broken. And we have seen that transformation is possible. We've seen this globally in many countries around the world, and we've seen it also in our own country, in Austria. As we mark the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter, it is time to reaffirm the vision of a world where peace and sustainable development are not parallel tracks, but shared and inseparable goals. Let me highlight briefly 3 points. First, development is prevention. Conflicts do not arise in a vacuum. It often grows in the cracks of broken institutions, deep inequality and despair. Investing in it is not a luxury. It is actually a cost-effective imperative. And it's not just me saying this. A recent IMF paper estimated that the return on prevention ranges from 26 to $103 for each dollar spent. Therefore, Austria, through its development cooperation that last year totaled $1.8 billion, strives to contribute to peace building and conflict prevention in different ways. Second, investing in peace building is key. We therefore remain committed in global peace building, adding to the $29 million Austria has given to the UN Multi-Partner Trust Fund over the past 5 years. We recently contributed a further $1 million to the Peace Building Fund and hosted a retreat to support the 2025 Peace Building Architecture Review. We see this review not as an exercise in reinvention, but as an opportunity to operationalize what works. We call on all member states to develop national prevention strategies and share them with the Peace Building Commission. Finally, peace building can significantly contribute to development. As a contribution to peace-building efforts, more than 100,000 Austrians have served as peacekeepers around the world since 1960. This includes missions in the Middle East, like UNIFIL in Lebanon, where our largest contingent is currently based, as well as others in the Western Balkans, in Africa, and in Cyprus. And we will continue to be a reliable partner in this regard. Mr. President, these are challenging times, but in challenging times we don't retreat, we recommit. And as the former Director General of the Vienna-based IEA, Mohamed El Baradei, once said, confidence cannot be imposed. It must be built patiently through transparency, dialogue, and a commitment to shared values. Let us build that confidence together. That's for me keeping in time limits. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Austria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Luxembourg.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, Luxembourg aligns itself with a statement to be delivered by the European Union, and I wish to add some comments in my national capacity. I congratulate Guyana for having organized this open high-level debate under its Security Council presidency. The theme that you have chosen, namely the link between poverty and conflict, is of tremendous importance as we prepare to mark the 80th anniversary of the Charter of the United Nations and its pledge to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. We have 5 years left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals under Agenda 2030. The Security Council has rightly stressed the fact that security, development, and human rights are inextricably linked. They are mutually reinforcing, and they are critical in order to establish a lasting peace. Luxembourg recognizes this link. We reaffirm our commitment to effective multilateralism that is rooted in human rights and social justice. My country will continue to dedicate 1% of our GNI for official development assistance. We support programs in social sectors, education, and health in order to help support our partner countries as they usher in prosperous, peaceful, and inclusive societies. We view this long-term commitment to sustainable development as an investment in peace and security. A number of United Nations agencies are currently crafting their strategic plans for the 2026 to 2029 period. We advocate systematically incorporating into these plans the humanitarian development peace nexus. Broadly speaking, there is a need to enhance coordination within the United Nations system. As part of the UN 80 initiative, which was launched by the Secretary General, we are called upon to make United Nations action more coherent, effective, efficient, and more relevant for the people it benefits. In the context of the implementation of the Pact for the Future and the review of the peace-building architecture, we believe there is a need to boost synergies between the Security Council and the Peacebuilding Commission. The PBC needs to be positioned to better fulfill its role as an advisory organ of the Council, and the work of the Council cannot but benefit from the insights of the PBC, which sheds light on the root causes of conflict, including poverty, more frequent exchanges facilitating peace and development being taken into account in peace operations, specifically during mandate design in accordance with Security Council Resolution 2594 on transitions. Luxembourg will continue to provide voluntary contributions to the Peacebuilding Fund and to support greater financing, therefore, through United Nations statutory resources in order to establish a lasting peace and to prevent conflict. Regional organizations, IFIs, the private sector, civil society all have a key role to play. There's an important need to propose prospects for the future for young people who represent a growing share of the population in developing countries, particularly in Africa. In order to be sustained, peacebuilding needs to bring in all of society. Inclusion of women, young people, children, vulnerable and marginalized groups are key. And the Security Council also needs to hear their voices. Luxembourg will continue to work alongside partners for a fairer, more safe and secure world with solidarity, faithful to the spirit and the goals and principles of the United Nations Charter. Thank you.
I thank the representative from Luxembourg for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Philippines congratulates Guyana for convening this timely, high-level open debate, and thanks the Secretary General and speakers for their valuable contributions. The Security Council has recognized the mutually reinforcing linkages between peace, security, and development. Indeed, there can be no peace without sustainable development. We are deeply concerned that only 17% of the Sustainable Development Goals are on track. This underscores the need for the international community to deliver on and safeguard development cooperation, particularly the eradication of poverty. The Philippines emphasizes the importance of addressing the root causes of conflict. Poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment are not merely economic issues. They are drivers of instability and demand a holistic and collective response. We therefore welcome the convening of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development and urge development partners to scale up their support for the fulfillment of the SDGs, especially in developing countries in conflict and post-conflict situations. At the same time, Mr. President, there can be no lasting development without peace and security. This principle is enshrined in our national security policy and national development plan. The Philippine government mainstreams peace building and development hand in hand utilizing a conflict-sensitive and peace-promoting paradigm in geographically isolated and conflict-affected communities in particular. The Philippines values inclusive and participatory governance. Involving all stakeholders is key to bringing about enduring and empowering solutions, including through the engagement of women and youth in conflict prevention and peace building. The Women, Peace and Security agenda remains vital in this regard. We wish to highlight the role of science and technology in conflict prevention. Scientific research and digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, can provide evidence-based analysis, identify early signs of instability, and offer tools for assessment of risks. We encourage the Security Council to explore the possible use of such tools with appropriate safeguards, including for climate-related challenges. The Philippines also encourages closer collaboration between the Security Council and other UN organs and bodies, development actors, and regional organizations like ASEAN, while respecting individual mandates. Coordination with the General Assembly, Peace Building Commission, ECOSOC, and the UN Development System can foster more integrated responses that address both security challenges and development priorities. This would be important for UN missions on the ground, working with regional offices and country teams, delivering complementary support for peace, development, and human rights. This is crucial for the UN as we commemorate its 80th anniversary. In conclusion, Mr. President, the Philippines reaffirms its commitment to the 2030 Agenda and supports the work of the Security Council to maintain inclusive, sustainable, and resilient international peace and security anchored on the UN Charter and the rule of international law. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Philippines for the statement. There are still a number of speakers remaining on my list for this meeting. I intend, with your concurrence of the members, with the concurrence of the members of the Council, to suspend the meeting until 3 p.m. The meeting is suspended.
No one is born hating. We are all born as human beings, free from prejudice. And as we grow up, we learn things, we acquire things, we pick up things from our environment, we read things.
Words sometimes prompt people to later take violent action. And so it's important to shut down hateful speech so that it doesn't then encourage people to move toward actions that are even more dangerous and deadly.
I think that hate is so pervasive. It keeps people from finishing school, it keeps people from being productive citizens, it keeps people from living their authentic selves and contributing to the world in the way that they can.
So the psychological effects can be really profound and impact on an individual's levels of functioning. So it is important that this is something that we all stand up against, this particular issue, and we all know that we have a role and responsibility to create a safe working environment, but also a safe home environment.
Everyone is vulnerable to hate speech, and we're going to see some form of discrimination at any age. If you're a victim of hate speech, if you're a victim of bias or discrimination, there is no age to be hurt.
So the idea is to really, learn about the other, have the opportunity to interact with them frequently, so you know them as individuals, as human beings, rather than as labels or as groups as such.
Nepal is very vulnerable to climate change. Children experience loss of homes and families because climate change presents itself in different ways. It comes in form of floods, it comes in form of landslides, it comes in form of lightning and strikes, and even wildfires when it's very hot. Then children experience loss of homes. They experience loss of education because of schools being washed away and being flooded. They experience loss of loved ones, including parents, including their own property or belongings like memories, school books, their clothing. They experience hunger because of floods which wash away crops. And we do believe that when children are equipped with awareness, but also given the opportunities to champion some of these efforts at school, at communities, and within the surroundings, then they can become powerful climate actors, even in terms of bringing about change, and ensures that children are not disrupted in any way, but they can continue receiving those services and continue learning despite what is happening, and they can adapt and be able to continue with life despite the effects of climate change.
I'm in Haiti with a UN helicopter on our way to the capital, Port-au-Prince, because this is the only way to get in from outside right now. We've already been told this helicopter had been shot at before. Haiti's children, particularly here in the capital, Port-au-Prince, they're engulfed by violence and armed groups. A couple of things you've got to understand in Port-au-Prince. 85% of this capital city is controlled by armed groups. 85%. So child recruitment into armed groups is rampant. Children get recruited. It's out of desperation. It's out of manipulation. It's out of being engulfed by violence. The point of this is that childhood should not be a gift. Childhood is a right.
I believe that the role of the UN is quite essential, and that the people who attend it as delegates do want to know each other better and want very much to be understood. Mr. President, we are very pleased that it has been possible for the General Assembly to adopt a resolution on the Somali border question, which is acceptable to the parties concerned.
Getting to know people better has been something that has occupied you for some time, even before you became a UN delegate. And I imagine that your prior experience traveling and concertizing has stood you in good stead.
Well, there's no doubt about that. We've had the opportunity of meeting people in other parts of the world and knowing for a short time a little bit more about them and their countries and some of their aspirations and so forth and so on. And it has helped in no little way, I must say.
The true ambassadors of art and true ambassadors also of humanity. I introduce to you with her accompanist France group, Miss Marian Anderson.
Everywhere you see people deprived of their basic human dignity, you consider it a moral failure of the international community because we haven't succeeded in providing the necessary support to these people that are innocently trapped in situations of armed violence. It's our core responsibility to do our best to reach these people, but we also need the agreement and the active support of the warring parties to allow us to access these trapped civilians wherever they are. The ICRC has been present in the region for many, many decades, including in Gaza. We have held these dialogues both with the authorities of Israel and with Hamas for many, many years. So this is why the ICC had the ability to support the implementation of the ceasefire agreement, and in particular, the release and the bringing back of the hostages and the detainees. We are not armed. We are not specifically protected other than by the trust that we receive from both sides and the security guarantees that we receive on both sides based on many, many years of working as a neutral intermediary and never taking sides in a conflict. We address violations of international humanitarian law regularly and very firmly, and especially when they occur. But we do it directly with the party concerned, and we do it confidentially. We don't disclose this information in public, and this has for many, many decades allowed the ICC both to uphold the dialogue with over 200 armed groups, but also with all the governments in the world.
People are really running out of food, clean water, medical supplies. The supply chain has really been strangled at the moment. If you think about land access, air access, when everything is closed down.
We are in Rugerero, which is the new site where the government of Rwanda has hosted the people that have crossed the border from Goma following the conflict that has really continued recently. And up to now, the government has received about 1,000 people that have arrived. They continue coming, and basic services being availed for them. We as the United Nations community, we are all in a preparation mode. It's the beginning of the movements of people, so we need to be vigilant and continue to do the monitoring and support them as the need arises.
President Chombe drove to Ndola Airport for ceasefire discussions with the United Nations. But fate intervened as the aircraft carrying Mr. Dag Hammarskjöld, Secretary General of the United Nations, crashed into the bush 7.5 miles north of Ndola.
At this juncture, the eminent person assesses it to remain plausible that an external attack or threat was a cause of the crash. The eminent person notes that the alternative hypotheses that appear to remain available are that the crash resulted from sabotage or unintentional human error. The Secretary General notes that the eminent person considers that it is almost certain that specific, crucial, and to date undisclosed information exists in the archives of member states. The Secretary General further notes the eminent person's assessment that he has not received, to date, the specific responses to his specific queries from certain member states. With significant progress having been made, the Secretary General calls on all of us to renew our resolve and commitment to pursue the full truth of what happened on that fateful night in 1961.
This great organization grew out of the pain and turmoil of the last war. It welded together in what should be a continued cooperation for world peace, all those who had fought against oppression. By all who have sacrificed themselves, by all sacrificing themselves in the fight for freedom and peace.
The big event is obviously the Secretary General speaking. The key is to have the journalists as well briefed as possible. The office of the spokesperson for the Secretary General is really the point of contact between the Secretary General and the global media. This office, which issues press statements, speeches, comments on events, we're the last line before things go out. And all of us in the office, every single staff member, has a huge responsibility. During the GA, every statement that goes out, every readout that goes out is always read by two people before it's issued to ensure that mistakes don't happen, because we wind up issuing about 120 readouts or so, dozens and dozens of speeches, and give dozens and dozens of interviews. The high-level week itself starts on the Tuesday, and there's a lot of interest in the Secretary General, what he's going to say up until Tuesday, until he delivers his speech. But after he delivers his